Alrighty then. Well, those of you who have been here, you already know what the deal is about, right? A new month, new challenge, new data set. We're gonna go through it, talk about it a little bit, talk about some tips and tricks ideas that me and Federico came up with when we were exploring the data set ourselves. We can also tell you one important thing to take a notice of, which is regarding the data, a very important notice. But most of you have probably already guessed it if you have looked at the data. We're gonna talk about also, of course, and reminding you about the feedback forms. Remember, guys, we need to get those right because that helps us to understand how we prepare for the next season, which is gonna be 2025. So make sure you fill them up whenever you have the QR code and the link posted in the social medias. So that helps us tremendously. And of course, once we've gone through the data set, once we just, had a little chat with Federico as always, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. So if you do have any questions during the session itself, make sure you put them in the comments. So we can go through them afterwards, see what you're talking asking about or talking about. And then of course, if we can answer that, we're going to support it. If it's something that we need to look into, well then we'll get back to you, right? We try to answer everything, but I mean, we're only people at the end of the day. We don't know everything straight away, but we try.
Remember, guys, there is a community group in LinkedIn where you
Yeah.
can ask questions. Why don't we use it that much? I don't know. Probably because of embarrassment. But there is nothing to be embarrassed if you are starting to Power BI, okay, and you need to know something. I actually inquiry and ask questions every day in my job. I gonna be afraid of answering someone that maybe is junior than me? No, maybe he had that experience before, and
Yeah.
therefore he can help me. So there is no embarrassing in asking questions when you are unsure about it. So please use the community group for the staff, and also I think you can talk to Avis and the StreamYard team regarding any issues.
Yeah, we have the one-on-one sessions. You also have our email webinars at zoomcharts.com where you can send those questions. You have the LinkedIn community for FP20 Analytics. There's a lot of resources, guys, that just don't be afraid to use them. And if you're kind of feeling, a little bit ashamed or embarrassed, yeah, everybody's going to think that I don't know this and it's a basic thing. Oh, trust me, the amount of times me and probably Federico as well have asked very basic questions just because it just kind of isn't in your mind at that point. It's ridiculous, but I'd rather ask a question and just get an answer to it straight away than be sitting in a report for example, like an hour or 2 hours just trying to figure something out when it could be just, a sentence from somebody else and like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. I should have thought about that. So don't be afraid.
Never.
All right. A quick intro. Yeah, I think that's good. Oh yeah, one more thing, guys, regarding the outfits, right? If at any point of time I see that you are slacking or not giving us the right questions or answers or not getting involved, I'm gonna bring out the Grinch. So be very careful about it.
That is a
All
great
right.
hat.
It's an amazing hat, right? It kind of combines the best of two worlds: full on Christmas and supposedly the evil spirit of Christmas. All right, I think we're ready to move on. Federico, you want to take away from the beginning on few things that you discovered?
Okay, yes, let me share the screen. And I discovered and I was told by other people. So people is already working on the data set that is quite interesting and good. So let me see. Okay, if I look into the right, that is where my actually screen with the Power BI file is. So that's the reason I normally look in that way. I loaded the data set. I'm gonna give it a proper name. Okay, I think it's Christmas and trends for me to know. The first thing that somebody told me is that if you look at the what is customer ID, okay, there is duplication and repetition. So if I go to customer 400, for example, okay, you can see that we have customer ID 400 is 62, is 37, is 57, and it had different gender. Okay, so clearly there is an issue with the customer ID column. And I'm gonna clear the filter. In my opinion, for me, I'm not gonna use it. I'm gonna prefer to use the transaction ID that I know is one by one. Okay, so how do I do that? I don't click delete. I don't want to delete it. I'm gonna go to choose columns. Go to choose columns. I'm gonna pick. I'm gonna say bye bye. See you later. And for me, that is hidden. Any time now I want to check people with age and everything, how many are gonna use the transaction ID. The transaction ID is that transaction to buy anything and it's unique. Okay, so it gives me that information that I need to. And because I am not analyzing the data set per customer, I'm not interested, I don't know. I just have a customer ID. Okay, I am analyzing quantity of transaction and build this data with different columns that we have or dimension that we have in the data set. Then I realized, okay, that the time column doesn't show us a time. I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna say time. And now I got the time. Okay? Then I personally don't like these columns. Sorry, before that, latitude and longitude by mistake, my is the other way around. So this is latitude and I name conflict. Okay, test. Most probably there is a better way to do it, but so that is longitude. And now I can here, no, here, and there. I think if I do this, it will work actually, if I don't break it. Yeah, it works. Okay, remember the point. And latitude and longitude, the header are wrong. The data is correct. You only need to change the header. Latitude is longitude, longitude is latitude. Okay? Simple. Another thing that I don't like is this column with true and false. It makes more sense for me to be yes or not, okay, or something relevant regarding that column. On this case, because I have 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay, I'm gonna select the 4 of them, and I think I did correctly. Yeah, I'm gonna right click, and I'm gonna replace the value. I can do that first. Can you see? I cannot, if I try to replace the value, and I try to put something there, it's not gonna allow me because it's a special data type. So the first thing I'm gonna do is say, okay, transform data type, convert it to text. And now I'm gonna have to select again everything.
Mhm.
2, 3. I'm missing one, or I skip one. Which one I did?
Right next to the
Okay.
second one.
No, that's true. It wasn't next to it. It's that one.
Yeah. And by the way,
Okay, now
Federico, when you open up
text.
the little pop-up window, we don't see it because it's a new window.
All right. So
But no
how
worries,
do I
I'll
do?
show it afterwards. I'll quickly show it
Okay,
afterwards.
okay, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So what I did, I select the 4 columns, I change the data type to text, and I'm going to replace the value. And I'm gonna say false, no, or no, no. And I'm gonna do the same again for the, Give me a second. That one. Now it's better. Why is not taking it now? That is okay. Any idea why it's not taking it?
Um,
Yeah,
Capital
this
letters and lowercase letters.
and they haven't taken the
Oh, okay.
change.
Yeah.
Now seems to be, and that one. Can you see? I try to with the. Okay, so again, I want to do all in one go. 2, 3, and that one. Replace value. Now I can see that is 4 is not, and another one, true is yes. These changes can be as you like. You can say if it's online, no online, whatever changes you want to make, something that for you easy to understand, and then you can display in visual better. Okay, so now I have done a couple of my changes. Another thing that I don't like is if I can here, is can you see the underscore? There I don't like that. I say again, replace value. I'm gonna put the underscore and I'm gonna replace it with a space and a space. Okay, fantastic. Okay, a little bit of preparation for my data is done, and now there is one more thing that I would like to do. I got total price and I have the discount amount. So I want to know the amount I have to pay. Okay, so I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna add a column. I'm gonna say subtract. I'm gonna pick up the column I want to subtract from. Okay, and can you see that there? That is amount to pay. And now I'm gonna select everything, guys. Control A, and I'm gonna force a data type. I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna make sure that everything is okay. It's a day, it's a time. Let's see here, decimal number or decimal number. Everything is okay. From me, I don't think anything else to do. You can start breaking your data set in dimension if you want to. Okay, but for me, it's done. Federico, how do you create a dimension? Right click, I'm gonna reference. Okay, I'm gonna call it location. I'm gonna come here to transform home. I'm gonna think, okay, where is location? Sorry, remove other columns, remove duplicate, order alphabetically. I think it's ascending or yeah. Okay, and now that is a dimension. I will go a little bit further to an index and make sure that index appear in the Christmas, and I will remove the location so the process can become a bit more and more uh, precise or better. Okay, but that is how simple you get a dimension. Okay, if I go now, close and apply, I don't know what you're gonna see now. Window, window. Okay, and you can see Power BI have detected the I'm gonna double click to make sure we are on the same path. And now I am ready to work. Transaction ID, where is transaction? The 10,000 transactions, okay, in the dataset. Okay, there you go, guys. Quickly, I check my data, make some changes to make sure that um, my data set is as much as I like to be and professional can be. Okay, and then I carry on working. Any question at the moment, or we can talk about question later? Meg, too late. I saw your question now. Can you help? We zoom the screen. Sorry, but Meg, I promise you, you are coming in the next webinar. I will have a massive screen just for you. Okay, sorry about that. I don't realize that sometimes it's difficult to see. So that's me, Avis. Now you go.
All right, grabbing the screen. There we go. Share this, hide this. All right. So, yeah, the windows that you were missing is basically what Federico did is with the true and false columns is first of all, he made sure to transform the data type because you can see by default it's a true false data type. It's a specific data type that the triggers and it's used in formulas afterwards. So, in order to adjust this and replace values, you can't do it directly because there's going to be a conflict of data types. So, you have to first convert it into a text. Yes, in this case, I know what I'm doing. And then afterwards, Federico was just right clicking on a column, replacing values, and saying that, hey, I actually want true to be yes, and false is no. So that's the thing that Federico did with his data. Um, what you can also do is think about if you're going to be utilizing these as basically another sort of slicer, or is it going to be a visual component itself? Because if it's going to be a visual component, one of the things that you can do is so instead of, for example, replacing true with yes and false with no, you can think about the context of the column. So, for example, you can see that this column is online order flag. So basically, true means yes, it was an online order. Means that I could essentially rename the column and say where, so basically call it, let's say, order type. And then where it was yes, say it was online. And where it was no, say it was offline or in person. So there's multiple ways on how you can go around exactly the same data type. It's all about how you want to tell your stories. Whether the users are more comfortable with, true false flags or yes or no approaches, it all depends on the end user. In your hands, the main thing that you need to think about is, okay, how would I like to see it if I would be just a regular user? Right? Don't think you're an expert in this. Think about the average Joe. That's usually the best approach I could give to you. If it's more specific for a customer, yeah, sure, you adapt to him. But in general cases where it's more of a public sample, go with the typical Joe approach, right? The average user, would he understand if it's just yes, no, true, false? What's better for an average user? So that's one of the things.
And that
Uh,
is what
yeah,
there
go
is
ahead.
a little question. Why he's doing yes or no? Any reason? It was me, and it's because I don't like false or true. I don't I don't know where is false there, where is true there, because it doesn't give me that as a user, that content. Okay, I prefer to say yes, it's online, no, it's not online, or as AB said, I can say online order, no online order. That's the reason.
So it's just pure preference, I would say.
Yes.
That's as simple as that. What else? If you go through these columns as well, you can play like see there's different types of data and everything. One of the things that I noticed and which kind of made me think about, okay, but how many unique values are there? Is going to be we have a column age, right? And for age, usually the trickiest thing is, okay, how many actual different values or distinct values we have. So I'm going to quickly enable the column profile. We can see that there's actually a huge age gap in between, right? So there's a lot of different ages in the data set. So having to showcase this as a column chart, well, you can kind of have a quick preview. This is how it's going to look like. And it looks kind of it's very long. There's a lot of values there, but theoretically we could still use it. So an alternative to this is you can also group those values into segments. And different segmentation approaches could be taken into account. You could just go with a very basic approach, and this is what I did primarily here, is I created groups based on bins. So bins are basically sizes of baskets within the values. And in order to do that, it's very simple. You find a column that you want to split into bins or groups, you right click on it, choose new group. By default, if it's a number, it's going to detect type bin. An alternative is list. So the difference between these is bin, you're always talking about either the size of the bin itself, or you're defining how many sizes of bins you have. So for example, I want to split everything into equal 4 bins or baskets basically, right? Whereas size of bin, you say, hey, I want to split into infinite amount of baskets, but each basket is going to hold 5. So there are different approaches to the numbers. Alternatively, list allows you to do the same approach but completely manually. Whereas binning is automatic, right? You physically go based on mathematical principles. Here, you define exactly what's going to go into where. Now, why this might be more feasible in certain cases is we all know there are different age sort of group variations, how people are sort of considered, right? Whether they're part of youth, whether they're part of young adolescents, whether they're teens, whether different age groups basically. And for those, you can't necessarily split it into equal groups of 5 or 10. Those are different ranges of age. So list would be more beneficial in that case because I can, for example, go, I don't know, for example, up until 22, make a group, and then rename this into something specific. So this is one approach to it. One thing that you can look into, for example, is this is the rabbit hole I went into, right? Once I got into groups, okay, I actually want to check if, for example, there's any specific split of age in Canada. Why I'm talking about Canada because the locations are in Canada. So I just looked at the statistics of Canada, going for different information. You can see I'm also found the GeoJSONs there. But for example, right here, sure, it's replaced with a different standard right now, but I can still use the same approach and say that, okay, everything starting from 15 to 24 is youth. Everything from 25 to 64, that's adults. So there are different ways on how you can categorize these things. You can go into similar groups just based on age. Like, for example, the second categorization you can see here, it's into group of 5, right? This is more of a bin principle. Whereas this is a list approach where you add multiple values within it. It's not necessarily exact amount of years. So that's something you can take into consideration. And the whole reason why I was even doing this is because in a visual, like I said, if I would have just a massive amount of years, I couldn't add it, for example, in a visual and just have it all nice and neatly together. Whereas if I do this with fewer groups, I can use it a lot more efficiently. And if I would want to have specific ages underneath or underneath the level, I could add actual age as second layer. So I can go into individual years. So it's all about the experience that you're trying to create to the users. You can create bins, you can create groups, you can also order the groups and different mechanisms. So there are different ideas and approaches that you can utilize to get interesting results, I would say. And actually, for this data set, I think there's so many dimensions that you can look into. There's promotions, there's discounts, there's locations like based on the store ID itself, based on the location like Ontario, Toronto, or whatever it is, based on different age groups. Like there's a lot of different interesting ideas that you can investigate here, the delivery time and everything. But yeah, that's one
Yeah,
of them.
I
Yeah,
think
go ahead.
that that's something that I do, the binning, but I don't do in Power BI in desktop. I probably do in Power Query, adding a
Yeah.
new column. So different, the same approach, the same idea, for you to understand the different approaches. Okay, but it can be done in Power Query with an if statement. Okay,
Hmm.
or you can do it as a bin in Power BI desktop.
Yep. So it's one of the things that you have to understand about Power BI. A lot of the things that are achievable and you've seen done in one case or one scenario might as well be done in a different way. That's one of the beauties of Power BI. There are different approaches to exactly the same solution. So always take that in consideration. What else? So what I did is I actually don't need any additional changes. I don't think I actually created anything. Hopefully, because I don't want to change anything here. So what I did is you can see that based on location, we're talking about Canada. And like I said, since it's in Canada, and if we look at the shape files, for example, that are available by default, well, we don't really have anything that would allow us to play around with Canada per se. We have USA, we have Great Britain, we have Australia, and the world. But we do have the alternative versions of using a KML or GeoJSON. Now, I'm not going to be the guy who's trying to figure this out, draw his own shapes, and I would, but I'm not there. I'm not that desperate. So, for most cases, what I actually do is I just look for information online. And this is exactly what I did also here. Same approach. I just used the good old Google, looked for different GeoJSONs, and I found this resource right here. You can see it's this data set is licensed under, so I opened it up, made sure that it's a public use so I can reference it and so forth. I just need to make sure that in a report I have a reference to it, where it's coming from and so forth. But there are a lot of different resources available online. And the reason why I found this is I wanted to have some split regional segmentation for the Canada itself. So I referenced it afterwards as a URL. Basically, my approach was I found GeoJSON because that's the shapefile I'm going to be using. I downloaded it. Then I used a website called geojson.io to upload it, just double check what's inside of it, just to understand if it's what I need or not. Because trust me, you can also find GeoJSONs which are very detailed and going down into like city territories, and that's not what you need here. You need a bigger picture. So I looked at it, then I got the file, I uploaded it, referenced it into the visual, and I'm good to go. So don't be afraid to enhance your own reports, right? That's the one thing me and Federico are always telling you. If you think that you can come up with additional columns that enhance the sort of story that you're trying to tell, go for it. Nobody's going to stop you. You're more than welcome to do it. Anything that helps you to create that report that you are kind of thinking about, just go for it. If you think that, for example, the same customer ID is something that you would still like to utilize in one way or another, well, then create a new column. Make a unique identifier based on maybe the row index or a combination of different items. There's different approaches that you can take there. But yeah, referenced a GeoJSON that I found online, and I'm using it right here, just so I can afterwards, for example, just click on a particular area, and that's going to be issued as a filter. You can see issue as a filter right here. Or
Did you,
you,
David,
yeah,
did you load the JSON file into the map in
yeah.
ZoomCharts?
So what I did
You have
is
that, yeah?
yeah. So the sample I think is going to be available for you as well, so you will be able to reference this GeoJSON itself. But what I did is I just got the file and I asked one of my colleagues to upload it into our server so I can reference it into the visual.
Okay.
But yeah, have the map now, played around with different values and everything. Made a timeline. The timeline is based on the date hierarchy, and the legend is based on the order flag, whether it's true or false. Right. So I wanted to have a split there just to see, for example, how many orders are coming online and how many are coming in person. And straight away, the one trend that we can see here, I would probably also add a legend just so people don't have to guess and try to figure out, okay, but what's orange, what's yellow? Position it somewhere in the center, maybe even at the top, not the bottom. There we go, something like that. And the one trend that we can immediately discover is basically the as the time progresses, we have a lot lower amount of in-person purchases and a lot higher number of online purchases. So that's the overall trend. If we look at the data a little bit more deeper, so for example, what's happening in a single year, we can drill down into it. And you can see that actually the data set shows you that most of the year you really don't have a lot of purchases. Sure, you still do have them, but in comparison, right, 156 versus 1.2K, it's kind of a difference. So another thing that you could think about how to investigate this or how to showcase this is, do I actually need the whole year, or do I just need the, for example, last 3 months or last even 2 months? See, just the November and December. So in one case, you could play around with the timeline. In other cases, you could play around with, let's say, the combo visual because you're working with categories, no longer not an actual timeline. It all depends on how you're going to be building your stories, right? So if it would be a combo visual, I would probably then do something like this. Just add columns right here. I would still use the original hierarchy. I'm just too lazy. Go for year, go for month. Under measures, I have, let's say, total sales. There we go. So this is based on year. And if I don't want to have I already removed the filter panel because I wasn't using it. So I would just say that, hey, I only want to focus on these 2 months. So that whenever a user drills down, he can see the split on those 2 months and just see a comparison. That's
And
one way on how to do it.
talking about that,
Sure.
remember there are transactions in there that they are not related to Christmas. Okay, there is a column there that tells you is that for Christmas. The column is called. Let me see if I find it. Event. Okay, so you go in the event. You go Black Friday. It can be for Christmas or it cannot be.
There you go.
Christmas market is Christmas, and none. None might be that it's a normal purchase that the guy didn't think, or maybe that is my understanding of
Yeah,
the that column. Okay, that not the purchase because I can buy things now and not necessarily be for Christmas. Okay, so take
absolutely.
that into account.
Absolutely. Like I said, there's a lot of interesting things that you can kind of take into account. Like the same approach with total sales, right? It's one way to think about sales. Okay, how much revenue I generated in total, right? But at the same time, we also have a column that is a return flag, which is basically true or false, meaning that whether the purchase was returned or not. So if you really think about the basics of it, right? If the purchase was returned, most likely I issued a refund. Means I didn't really make the full sales,
I don't
or
know.
you made a gift card or anything. So I really maybe want to focus on those purchases that were not returned. So like went full on, no issues, purchase made, happy customer. Or alternatively, I can also bring in a next visual, right? So this is how stories are usually built. Let's see, we have the customer satisfaction rating. So I could go for something like, okay, use this as a category. Then, based on the amount of transactions, I want to see actually how things are getting split down. So I can see that if it was returned, actually the highest amount of returns were coming from 3-star ratings, which is like the customers were like, it was okay, but most likely they didn't like it
Not like it.
based on this. Yeah. If it's false, meaning that it wasn't returned, we can see that, well, yeah, it makes sense that for false, or actually it doesn't really. You're kind of split between people who love it and hate it at the same time. But
And,
this is what the data set shows you.
yeah, there is another interesting. Talking about the storytelling, there is
Sure.
another very interesting column that is weather during transaction. Okay, and in the weather during the
Yep.
transaction, we have sunny, snowy, and rainy.
Yep.
If we think it's sunny, people more probably is on the street, can be buying or not. Okay, but if it's snowy or rainy, you may decide to stay home and stand online shopping. I think it's quite interesting to see that combination. If there is any relationship between the weather and the shopping pattern, there are more shopping, less shopping. Okay, I think that really I would like to know if we are influenced. But
Hmm.
because I am at home and I know watching telly, I decide to do more shopping than if it's sunny and I am outside.
Absolutely. And you can, because once you get this, you can even look at it based on the year, right? Does it actually change from year to year? Or is it pretty much the same with minimal deviations from the standard? There's a lot of interesting, like I said, there's actually a lot of interesting things that you can go for here. There's a lot of questions that we already posted in the challenge page itself. So under the brief, you have few questions that you can look into. Just remember, guys, this doesn't mean you have to answer every single one of them. These are just ideas on what you can look into. If you want to analyze something that was not mentioned in these 10 questions, you can still do it. There's nothing that restricts it. These are just few ideas on what might help you.
Yeah. Pick your angle and do your analysis, and then you explain to us in your post.
Exactly.
Okay, as simple as that. You don't need to follow that. They are for try to guide you if you believe you're stuck. But if you are a semi-professional, excellent Power BI developer, creating your own analysis, find an
Yeah,
angle and produce it.
absolutely. Because ever even these little things that we already made, like little flags and everything, right? Remember that you can take your own different approach on how to handle this. You could keep it very basic and professional, right? You have text, you have numbers, you're not going into sort of images and stuff like that. But at the same time, well, customer satisfaction, you're rating from 1 to 5. The first thing that comes to my mind is stars, right? That's how we're used to seeing
PG.
satisfaction ratings. Yeah. Or since it's Christmas, it might be candy canes that are getting filled up. There's different ideas that you can handle here. Same for weather, right? A little sun, a little snowflake, or rain. Well, a cloud or rain or anything. Just play around with it. You don't have to be very strict about everything. Make it interesting. Make it help you tell the story. Sure. Give me a
Uh,
second. I get a question
following
from the team. Yeah,
following
go ahead.
no no following Avis. Remember, it's a Christmas season report. Okay, try to find a nice color palette. Don't go crazy with the green and the red. That is gonna be too much on your eyes. Okay, go to any of these fantastic website or color palette and put Christmas color palette. Okay, and choose a sensible one.
Exactly.
Okay,
And
if the previous challenge, the candy market was one for this, a nice color palette. Remember, this Christmas, think about your color palette, any little, I don't know, images you want to place or illustrations, okay? But don't go crazy. Don't go green and red all around because it will be too much in your eyes.
oh, absolutely. We had one challenge where I think it was even last year, yeah, but people kind of listened to us and didn't go too crazy. But we still had a lot of sort of submissions where we were going through it and just it all looked the same because everybody was emphasizing on the red, the green, because it's typical colors for Christmas. But don't forget, guys, that red and green have also very psychological impact on good and bad. So just make sure that the data that you're showcasing in those colors, even if you are, it makes sense. It doesn't contradict with the typical story that you're telling. So be cautious about those colors.
Anyways, I got two questions. One
Sure,
is
go ahead.
from Eniola at the Koja. Sorry, Eniola. I saw your question, but Avi, the question is the product type is really not specific? I
I think the product, so the product name and category, to me, we can actually just quickly check it. It seems like it's exactly the same, just extend that with product.
product, yeah.
So, what I would probably do, there are two ways on how I would handle this. One way is I would just remove one of these because, well, one of them becomes obsolete. It's exactly the same thing. Alternatively, what I would also could potentially do is so basically, what take this column and for this column, create another column which is just a randomizer and pick between one and, for example, three. Based on the randomizer, that's going to allow you to afterwards create unique identifiers. And for those unique identifiers, I would create different product names. So, for example, for clothing products, I would name a Christmas sweater, a Christmas jumper, and a Grinch hat. That's it. So, we're selling three Christmas clothing parts. But it's one idea.
Yes. At the moment, Neola, it is what it is. That what you have, you can expand it, as Avis has mentioned, or you just decide what product name doesn't help me much because category actually does, and play with that.
Or
Okay?
just remove it.
Or just remove it, yes. There is another question that is
Yep.
for me is I don't know if I'm going to pronounce your name properly. It is Biart. Okay. No, the data set doesn't need to be clean a lot. It's actually we what we have shown you is just because we like to do some kind of stuff. There is minimum limited amount of cleaning that you have to do in the data set. Basically, you can just download and play around without any headache.
Yeah. It's purely for sort of usability afterwards, but it doesn't mean that you cannot create a very good report still with the data, even without touching a lot of things here. The only thing that you would need to pay attention to is just remember, guys, that latitude and longitude are the other way around. Apologies for that. Things happen, right? Well, we
That
messed
woman,
up.
sorry.
So that's one thing. But I mean, at the same time, right? The way I was looking at it, yeah, okay, we messed up. But at the same time, if you see that all the locations are talking about Canada and you put them in, well, now it's correctly because I switched it up, but you put it in and you see that everything is kind of in the middle of Antarctica, I would have some questions.
Yeah.
So this is the reason why you play
Well,
around with the data and just see what's happening.
Peace. She have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Peace. Yes, I have a question, but he doesn't say the question. So it kind of I'm get trying to read her mind, okay, and see what he says.
She's just creating suspense.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Anyway, guys. Okay. Hello. I have a question. Go, peace for it. Tell me the question.
whilst we're waiting for the question, one thing, guys, that I can want to quickly remind you is that I mentioned in the beginning those feedback forms. So if somebody from the team could put on a QR code, that would be amazing. Make sure you fill those up because it helps us to understand whether we're doing it good or bad and what things need to be changing. And the other thing is, Federico is going to probably kill me if I don't remind this. We also have a giveaway, right? So by participating in the feedback forums, you're also participating in the giveaway from Pact. And you get amazing books from Pact regarding Power BI, regarding data analysis, data visualization. There's different ideas there. So make sure you fill in the forms, help us, and you're gonna get some sweet gifts basically afterwards. Not everybody, but we kind of have to limit at some point.
Very quickly, three
Yeah,
questions, and I go for them. Eniola, the only way to reduce the width of a column, the inside of the column, is trying to get pseudo names. Okay, you got, for example, a January, you can say just Jan, Jan for January. Otherwise, it's gonna be that long, and there is no way to visually in the visual, okay, and reduce it. You're gonna have to break my neck for me to be able to read your report. Second question is, um, that was a piece. There are plenty of YouTube channel. ZoomCharts have also some videos on YouTube. Go to YouTube, put Power BI, and you have tons,
oh,
tons of
absolutely.
YouTube channel. There is one more question that no, that's it.
Because on the YouTube, the way I usually say this also to my students is try looking for different channels because everybody kind of conveys the message differently. They might be talking about exactly the same thing, but the way and how they tell about it and showcase it is completely different. So just go through channels, see which one you like the most, right? Like for example, for some of the visual stuff, I really enjoy looking at Bass's channel. So How to Power BI, it's an amazing resource. You see a lot of interesting things from time to time. For more data related things than just Power BI or data analytics fabrics in general, there's Guy in a Cube, for example. There's also SQL BI. There's a lot, like I said, there's a bunch of different resources.
Okay,
Uh,
Guy in a queue, Fagner QBI, they are too mature for us, guys. We are newbies.
yeah, okay.
Okay,
Let's
okay.
go to them a little bit later.
Yeah, you go to them a little bit later. For you now, you want to know what is Power BI, how to start creating before you go to the big boys, because even me get lost with the big boys. Um, and I find these two channels massively boring. Sorry. I'm not a fan of, well, Guy in a queue, I like them more, but SQLBI, the Italian, they bore me to death every time they try to explain everything. But there are plenty, plenty of um, YouTube videos there. So check it out. But remember your level when you are IR learning. When you want is Power BI 101.
Yeah,
Okay, you don't want Power BI 300. You want 101. Eniola 3 pages or in the description in the report that you can get or the rule you can get in my website or you can get
I'm gonna open it just
in
in a sec.
Sunshine there. Yeah.
There we go.
Matthew actually put a very nice YouTube channel from in Jai Park.
Yeah, also.
I think I not that I like it too much, but I recommend it for you guys.
It's a good follow through guide to kind of see how things are done.
Yeah.
But
So that
like
are
we said, just find the one that you like, right? Something that I like, for example, Federico might see and be like, "That's just hella boring." For me, it's like, "No, no, no. What do you mean? It's amazing."
Goodly is a good channel. Yeah, Park is a good channel. Whatever I like it more or less, that is totally irrelevant. And what else? There are quite a few. I think. I remember now the question, and I
For
forgot.
visuals, what is more appealing, professional dark color tones or bright ones? I'd say it just depends on how you wanna position your report. There's gonna be audience for both of them. There's gonna be people who like the dark colors. I personally prefer the dark colors. I know that a lot of my colleagues they prefer the light tones because they hate the dark themes. And trust me, I've tried it and I've got the feedback. So most of our reports are now light.
Yeah. Remember your audience. Who is your audience? And if your client is telling you that he want pink, you have to put pink. It doesn't matter what you think about the coloring of the day. Okay.
Exactly.
How I made this pink to place well, okay, on this report. That will be your question. Okay. I am more of a light color palette than a dark one, but actually it's up to you what you prefer more. Okay,
Yeah.
and your audience. Remember your audience. Who is the report for? Okay, or two.
If you really want to play around with different colors, well, use the same report but create two versions, a light and a dark one.
I remember the question now. If somebody
Yep.
asked if the visuals you were using were custom visual or Power BI native visual, his visual are custom visual.
Yep.
Okay, they are called ZoomCharts visuals. Okay, Google it. It is there. If you know, Alexandra will put a link to the page. Okay.
And also, one important thing for those of you who are new here is if you go to the challenge page on ZoomCharts website, one of the things that you can do, well, you don't need to see that. Thank God you can't see the whole thing, otherwise my license would be leaked. But if you go under the challenge page, when you sign up, you can see you can submit the report and you can also get the developer's license. In my case, it says see my license. If you're going to be new, it's going to say get my developer's license. So the developer's license is a special account we create on a new tenant. We give you the account name and the password. Remember that you're going to have to change the password on the first login. But this account is going to have access to every single one of our visuals. You don't need no additional extra licenses to use our visuals within the challenges to create reports. So by getting the developer's license, you can utilize every single one of our visuals, try them out, play around with them, and create reports that you want to have there. So you don't have to worry about these things. There are certain restrictions, like for example, of course, you can't use them afterwards in your own personal files because as soon as you're going to try to publish it to web, it's going to say license expired. Well, there are some certain restrictions, right? Makes sense. That's why there's a submit process where we verify things and we republish things. But yeah, you get all the licenses and everything like that. Yeah, Federico, go ahead.
Okay, guys, I have to go. I have a meeting just after finishing this in 5 minutes. And for somebody of Latin America, the meeting I have is with Bimbo, okay, the bakery, and we are producing a fantastic report from them. Okay, so a lot of tasty treats. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Avi, thank you, Alexandra. I have to leave now. Bye
No
bye.
worries. Thank you so much, Federico.
How do I leave? Here.
And that's a
Bye.
question. You're stuck with
Bye.
us. Bye. Well, we're down to one. But yeah, from my side as well, like the main thing I want you guys to remember is don't be afraid about trying. You don't have to create the first report that is just pure excellency, right? Play around with different visuals, play around with different setups, see what works. One thing I can recommend for those of you who are trying Power BI, especially in the beginning, don't always just delete the first iteration of the visual straight away. So, for example, if I create something like this, right? Let's say I use the flag in a legend, I create something like this. That is one of my versions of the report or the visual. But I then decide I actually want to make it something else. If you think that this might be useful somewhere down the road, or you just want to keep it, do what I do. I usually have pages where I just have variations of visuals. So, for example, I might create one like this. Okay, that's one. Might create a copy of this and just play around with different setups and say, okay, here I'm actually going to be using stacked variation of rather than clustered. Okay, so that's an alternative. What else I could do? I want to have this, but actually for the unit price, or the colors are different, or the column paddings, or the cluster paddings are different, and you just want to see the difference between them and see which one works better. Remember, once you're done with everything, you can pick the one that you need and delete these pages afterwards, right? Whereas I typically do, I just save a copy of it where I have all these variations because I might need to come back to them later on. Just have these variations here, and when you submit it, get rid of them. But the reason why this is so important is because some of the visuals or the combinations that you create, they take a lot of time and effort to create perfectly or the way you want them to be. But it also means that you're deleting something that was previously done, right? And then you have to go back and like, okay, what I did here? I selected this, this was there, the colors were these. So just avoid these things. Have these combinations and then just see you have unlimited amount of pages, right? Just have like there's a blank page for whatever reason, so delete that one. But I played around with something here, played around with something here, here. That's fine. I'll create one final version at the end, but for now, well, I might as well keep them, right? They're not in any way, shape, or form kind of breaking my experience. Um, for those of you who are new, you might want to try to play around with field parameters, and that's the keyword you can look for: field parameters and how to utilize them. But essentially, field parameters is an amazing capability that allows you to, for example, dynamically switch between different measures being utilized in visuals or different categories. Like, for example, here I'm using field parameters as well, and I'm using this drop down to allow the user to define what's going to be the hierarchy of the drill down. What I mean by this, if you look at the chart right now, initially I'm looking at the payment type. If I click on it, I look at the age group. So, for example, I can see that, okay, under what was it, cash, the 20-year group was the highest one. If I go under debit cards, it seems like 30 is the highest one. Okay, so that's one way approach. But what about a general sort of assumption, right? What happens with those particular categories as an overall without the split of these? So field parameters allow me to, by adjusting my selections, change completely the order of how the drill downs are being applied. So now I can look at an age group and then go down into age group and see, okay, how are different transaction groups being processed? So field parameters is something that you can definitely utilize, and it is supported also by our visuals. One thing that might happen from time to time is that by default, Power BI doesn't fully recognize, for example, what's being utilized or used within a visual. So you might end up with something like this, right? These typically are also not going to be drop downs, they're going to be vertical lists. I'm just going to make it look as default as possible, right? So, for example, keep it here. Yeah, that's fine. Have it like this. So, what you're going to have is, for example, something like this, right? You select both of them, and instead of showing the values, you just see the names of the group. And of course, both of them take 50% because there's one unique group. What you do in these cases is make sure you click on the visual, you find the parameter, click on the little arrow going down, and you switch to show values of selected fields. Before that, it was basically referencing the field name, not the value within the field. So there are different ways on how this can be handled as well. There are different cases, different issues, but trust me, none of the things, or most likely none of the things that you run into, is something unique that has never happened. Use Google, same sort of issue that you're trying to do. There's the community where you can ask questions, so just don't be afraid to play around and ask questions. Yeah, sure. I can see that we have another question. Let me just remove this window because it's in front. Or yeah, Anka. So Do you use custom visuals, or all of them are included in Power BI standard visuals? So all of these, the ones that I'm using, well, except the cards and the slicers, are ZoomCharts Drill Down Pro visuals. Those are the ones you get with the developer's license. And if you want to learn more about these, well, there's a bunch of resources. There's the report example gallery. There's also the academy, where you can go through the visuals and learn everything about every single one of them. There's documentation. For those of you who are new, actually, another amazing resource that I can give you a hint about is if you go to ZoomChart's website and find webinars. For those of you who are new, right? I mean, it helps everybody, but these are the upcoming webinars. But if you go down, you have the full archive of all the webinars that we have hosted. And what I would recommend is take a look at few of the top 5 announcements. It's where we talk about what's good, what's bad about the reports, what could be done differently, what could you improve upon. So just see if there's anything relatable also to your report. Whew, getting a dry mouth. But yeah, from my side, that's actually going to be it. I covered what I wanted to. I talked about the visuals. I talked about the challenge. The only thing that's left on my side is reminding you to fill in the feedback forms, right? Participate in the giveaway. And the other thing is to wish you all a Merry Christmas or any other holiday you're celebrating. Just spend a little bit of time with your family. Have an amazing weekend, few days, whatever it is. Just have an amazing rest.